We have seen quite a few things in Fluent API. That being said, if we take a look at the on-model creating, it is getting pretty long and extensive. Wouldn't it be much better if you can organize this code based on the entities? We will take a look at that in this video. In order to do that, what we have to do is we'll go to Solution Explorer. Let me close all the file except this one first. And in here, we'll be doing that inside the data access. So here we can create a new folder. And we will call this Fluent Config. Right now, what I want to do is I want to create files for all of the Fluent APIs. So let me add those class files here. First one, I call it Fluent Publisher Config. Now before we move anything from AppDB context to here with EF Core, let me make this public first. If we want to add the configurations for Fluent API, this should extend from the interface iEntity type configuration. We will have to do a control dot here, and you can see we have to add the using statement for Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. And within here, you can see we have to specify an entity. So the class that we will be configuring here is Fluent Publisher. So we'll add that class. Now the steps here are slightly different if you are working with Entity Framework. But here we are dealing with EF Core. In Entity Framework, you used to configure all of that inside constructor. But with EF Core, we need a method here, public void configure. And within here, we will have the parameter for entity type builder. We will have to do a control dot. You can see right here, it will add the using statement for Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.metadata.builders. Here also, it is the generic type. So we need to define the class here, which will be Fluent Publisher. Let's call this builder here. And then we can use that directly to do all the configuration. So we can say builder dot and we can have all the configuration. Let me go back to our AppDB context, and with publisher we have these three. So I'll cut it from here and paste it right here. Now here we do not need this entity. What I can do is I can copy this model builder and rename that, and I will just have to remove the entity because we already defined that right here at the top. Everything else can remain as it is. So this looks good for the publisher. Let me save it here and let me do the same for the other classes. I'll do it for the Fluent Author first. Let me make it Fluent Author Config. I can just copy this and paste it right here. We will do the control dot to add the namespaces. And this will be Fluent Author. We'll go here, get everything for Fluent Author, cut this, come back and paste here, and we'll remove the entity. That being said, we have three more that is remaining, so let me just copy this class and paste it 3 more times here. I'll change the names for all 3 of those. Great, let's start with the book details first. Change the class name. This looks good. Let's do the same for Fluent Book Config. And we have the book author. So for all three of them, we updated the names. So that looks good. Let's update the properties. We will first go, Fluent Publisher is done. Let me close that. We'll go to the AppDB context. We have the book author here. Let me cut this. We have book author config. And we'll remove the entity. Perfect, looks good. Let me close this. Next we have is the book. So we can cut this. We have the Fluent book config. We'll paste it here, remove the entity. After that, the last thing is the book detail. So let's do that as well. Great. Now whenever you are adding that in another file, I try to maintain a format. So the format or the layout that I prefer is, first thing will be the primary key. The format or layout that I prefer is even before adding primary key. If you were changing name of the table, that will go at top. So name of the table will be the first thing here, followed by primary key, and then all the other properties that you are tweaking with Fluent API. Last thing that you should do is add the relations. So I have tried to use the same format here, and make sure that in your application you pick a format and stick with that. The reason is because that if you are using same format throughout all of the files, then it will be easy when you are adding something new or debugging something. That being said, we have added all of the files, but we have not used them inside our onModel creating. How do we add that here? So adding them here is pretty simple. You will have to use the model builder and we'll call the apply configuration on there. In here, we'll create a new object of all of the classes. So we have the Fluent config files here. So first we'll go with Fluent book config, and we'll do the same for the remaining ones. Perfect. So with this, you can see we have added all of the configurations. And that's how you can see your onModel creating is much more organized now. One thing you should notice is I have left these ones outside. You can obviously create them, but the reason I left them is these I treat as hybrid. So if there is some configurations that you do with data annotations and some using Fluent API, I try to keep them here. That way I know that there is a combination of both data annotation as well as Fluent API.